Imagine a life where every act of kindness is met with scorn, every sacrifice taken for granted. Tonight, dear listeners, we invite you into the world of The Locket's Secret. This isn't just a story. It's a gripping journey of a young man, Ethan, burdened by unyielding responsibilities and a family's harsh indifference. But what if the very foundation of his life is a lie? What if the parents he dutifully serves aren't his own? And a hidden truth, locked within a forgotten locket, holds the key to a destiny far more extraordinary than he could ever imagine. Prepare to be captivated by a tale of betrayal, discovery, and the profound power of a hidden past. Before we begin, please hit that subscribe button to join us on this unforgettable adventure. The incessant drumming of rain against the attic window was a familiar lament to Ethan Mallory. It mirrored the ceaseless ache in his young heart, a dull throb that had become as much a part of him as the calloused skin on his hands. But this morning, the rain seemed to carry a new, unsettling rhythm, a prelude to the discordant symphony that was his life in the sprawling, perpetually damp Oakhaven Manor. He lay on the narrow, creaking cot, the thin blanket offering little solace against the chill that seeped through the ancient stone walls. Outside, a sliver of pallid dawn was beginning to pierce the heavy gray clouds, casting long, distorted shadows across the cluttered attic room, his solitary domain. The air hung thick with the scent of dust, old wood, and a faint, lingering aroma of mildew, a testament to years of neglect, much like Ethan himself. A sharp, impatient banging from downstairs shattered the fragile stillness. "Ethan, get down here, you lazy boy. The fire won't light itself, will it?" That was Arthur, his adoptive father, his voice a gruff bark that always seemed laced with disdain. Ethan flinched, a familiar knot tightening in his stomach. It was barely past 5, but in Oakhaven, Ethan's day began long before the sun dared to fully rise. He rose stiffly, his young frame already bearing the weariness of someone twice his 17 years. His reflection in the cracked, dusty mirror was a study in muted tones. Lank, dark hair falling across a pale forehead, eyes the color of a stormy sea, often downcast, holding a perpetual shadow of something unsaid. His clothes, hand-me-downs from his younger brother Liam, were several sizes too big, adding to his perpetually ungainly appearance. Unlike Liam's boisterous charm and Sophia's radiant smiles, Ethan seemed to exist in the periphery, a muted echo in the otherwise clamorous household. As he descended the narrow, winding staircase, each creak of the old wood seemed to amplify the silent divide between him and the rest of the family. The air downstairs was warmer, thick with the aroma of frying bacon, a stark contrast to the cold austerity of his attic sanctuary. Margaret, his adoptive mother, a woman whose lips seemed permanently pursed in disapproval whenever she looked at him, stood by the stove, her sharp eyes already scrutinizing his every move. Liam, all of 12 years old with a mop of golden curls, was sprawled at the large oak table, already digging into a plate piled high with food. Sophia, a delicate rose of 10, giggled at some private jest shared with Margaret. Ethan's presence seemed to cast a slight pall over their morning cheer. He moved silently, his movements practiced and efficient, honed by years of unspoken expectations. He knelt by the hearth, the damp chill of the stone seeping through his thin trousers, and began the familiar ritual of coaxing the reluctant fire to light. The wood was damp, resisting his efforts, and a frustrated sigh escaped his lips. "Honestly, Ethan, you can't even manage a simple fire properly," Margaret snapped, her voice cutting through the air like shards of ice. The comparison, as always, stung. Liam, the favored son, could seemingly do no wrong in their eyes. Sophia, the darling daughter, was shielded from any hardship, Only Ethan bore the brunt of their constant criticism and demanding expectations. He finally coaxed a fragile flame, the warmth a small temporary comfort in the vast emptiness he often felt. As he began preparing a meager breakfast for himself, a stale crust of bread and a weak cup of tea, Arthur entered the kitchen, his imposing figure filling the doorway. His gaze swept over Ethan, a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps not quite dislike, but certainly not affection, in his steely blue eyes. "The north fence needs mending before the sheep wander off again," Arthur grunted, not meeting Ethan's gaze. "And Jenkins at the farm needs an extra pair of hands with the harvest today. You'll go after you've finished your chores here." Ethan simply nodded, his throat tight with unspoken resentment. Another day of back-breaking labor, while Liam and Sophia would likely spend their day in leisurely pursuits. It was the familiar, unfair rhythm of his life. Yet, a flicker of something new, a nascent rebellion, stirred within him. Lately, the constant disparity in their treatment had begun to gnaw at him with a sharper edge. He'd started noticing the subtle ways they avoided his touch, the almost imperceptible sighs of exasperation when he spoke. It was as if he were an unwelcome guest in the very home he had always known. Here, a small, unsettling incident occurs. As Ethan reached for a chipped mug for his tea, his hand brushed against Margaret's as she placed a freshly baked scone on Liam's plate. Her reaction was instantaneous. She recoiled as if burned, wiping her hand on her apron with a visible grimace. The casual dismissal, the almost visceral distaste in her eyes pierced Ethan with a sudden, sharp clarity. It wasn't just a lack of affection, it felt like an active aversion. Later, as he toiled in the muddy fields, the weight of his isolation pressed down on him. He watched a robin tending to its young in a nearby tree, a pang of longing echoing in his chest for a connection, a warmth he had never truly known. He often wondered about his early childhood, those hazy, fragmented memories of a different woman, her face soft with a gentle smile, a melody hummed in a language he no longer understood. These fleeting images are like shards of a forgotten dream, offering a brief respite from the harsh reality of Oakhaven. He had dismissed them as childish fantasies, but lately they had begun to feel more insistent, more real. That evening, after another long day of relentless work, Ethan retreated to his attic room, the silence a heavy blanket around him. He reached under his cot, pulling out a small, dusty wooden box he had discovered hidden beneath a loose floorboard weeks ago. He didn't know why he hadn't mentioned it, a strange instinct for secrecy guarding his find. Inside, nestled amongst dried flowers and a tarnished button, lay a faded photograph of a young woman with striking eyes and a delicate silver locket engraved with an intricate, unfamiliar symbol. As he traced the cool metal of the locket with his calloused finger, a profound sense of unease settled over him, a disquieting feeling that the key to his inexplicable existence within the cold walls of Oakhaven Manor might just lie within this small, forgotten treasure. The silver locket lay heavy in his palm, a cool, enigmatic weight. Its intricate symbol, a swirling knotwork reminiscent of ancient Celtic designs, pulsed with a silent question that reverberated through his very bones. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a fragment of a dream, a tangible link to those fleeting, half-remembered visions of a gentle face and a forgotten melody. The faded photograph tucked beside it solidified the intuition that had begun to bloom in the sterile garden of his life. The woman's eyes, a stormy gray, just like his own, gazed back at him with an unnerving familiarity, a silent promise of connection. A tremor ran through him. This wasn't just a fleeting discomfort or a familiar ache of loneliness. This was a seismic shift, a crack in the bedrock of his understanding. The puzzle pieces of his life, scattered and disconnected, suddenly began to shimmer with an unsettling coherence. Why was he so different from Liam and Sophia, with their flaxen hair and boisterous laughter? Why did Margaret recoil from his touch as if it carried a contagion? Why did Arthur's gaze always seem to slide past him, never truly meeting his eyes? The answers, he now suspected, lay beyond the confines of Oakhaven Manor. He clutched the locket, its metallic coolness a stark contrast to the burning intensity within him. His mind raced, replaying countless instances of subtle slights, of being overlooked, of being treated as a burden rather than a child. He remembered the Christmas when Liam received a gleaming new bicycle and Sophia a doll with porcelain features, while Ethan received only a worn, repurposed work coat. He remembered the chilling echoes of Margaret's voice. We need to make it so unpleasant for him, he'll leave on his own. Each memory, once a source of quiet sorrow, now fueled a fierce, desperate need for the truth. The attic, usually a sanctuary of solitude, now felt like a vault of secrets. He spent hours meticulously sifting through every forgotten nook and cranny, a silent detective in his own life. He found nothing else of significance, no hidden letters, no birth certificates, just the pervasive dust and the ghosts of other people's forgotten possessions. Yet the very emptiness felt like a confirmation. The absence of any record of his arrival, any baby photos among the family albums downstairs, spoke louder than any document could. His behavior grew subtly more withdrawn, his eyes sharper, scrutinizing Margaret and Arthur with a new clinical detachment. He observed their interactions with Liam and Sophia, the tender glances, the easy laughter, the unsolicited words of encouragement. The contrast was a blade twisting in his gut. They were parents, true parents, to his siblings. To him, they were wardens. The coldness he had always accepted as simply their nature now felt like a calculated performance. He remembered Mrs. Gable, the eccentric village historian, whose cottage stood at the edge of Oakhaven, overgrown with rambling roses and thick with the scent of aged paper. She was a repository of local lore, her mind a labyrinth of lineage and long-forgotten tales. She recalled her peculiar knowing glances, especially when Margaret or Arthur would dismiss him with a wave of their hand. Her eyes, ancient and wise, always seemed to hold a flicker of sorrow, a silent empathy he couldn't quite decipher until now. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that Mrs. Gable held a piece of his puzzle. One blustery afternoon, when Margaret and Arthur were away at the market and Liam and Sophia were occupied with their studies, Ethan slipped out of Oakhaven Manor. The wind whipped his ill-fitting coat around him, a biting reminder of his solitary quest. His heart hammered against his ribs, a drumbeat of fear and exhilaration. This was a daring act of defiance, a direct challenge to the unspoken rules that governed his existence. Mrs. Gable's cottage was a haven of organized chaos, stacked high with books and ancient artifacts. The air inside was warm, smelling of dried herbs and old parchment. Mrs. Gable herself, a spry woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that sparkled with intelligence, sat by a roaring fire, knitting. She looked up as Ethan entered, a flicker of recognition, then something deeper passing through her eyes. "Ethan Mallory," she said, her voice surprisingly strong for her age. "It's been a long time since you graced my doorstep, child. What brings you to an old woman's den of dusty secrets?" Ethan swallowed, clutching the locket in his pocket. "Mrs. Gable," he began, his voice surprisingly steady. I need to ask you about my past, about my family." He pulled out the locket and the faded photograph, placing them gently on her cluttered table. "Do you recognize these?" Mrs. Gable's eyes widened, her nimble fingers ceasing their knitting. She picked up the locket, turning it over, her thumb tracing the familiar knotwork. A long, weary sigh escaped her lips, carrying with it years of untold stories. Her gaze met Ethan's, filled with a complex mixture of pity, regret, and a profound sense of duty. "Ah, the locket," she murmured, almost to herself. "And Anya, poor, brave Anya." She looked up at Ethan, her gaze piercing. "You have your mother's eyes, boy. The same restless spirit, the same deep current of emotion." Ethan felt a jolt, a sudden electric current of hope and dread. "My mother? So they aren't my parents, are they?" The words were a whisper, barely audible over the crackling fire. Mrs. Gable shook her head slowly, a sorrowful expression etching deeper lines onto her aged face. "No, Ethan. Margaret and Arthur, they are not your birth parents. They were given responsibility for you, yes, but not by blood. Your mother, Anya, was a dear friend, a beautiful, talented soul, trapped by circumstances beyond her control." A deluge of emotions washed over Ethan: anger, confusion, a strange, dizzying sense of validation. He felt a profound shift within him, as if a heavy cloak had been lifted, revealing a gaping wound he hadn't known was there. Circumstances? What circumstances? Why did she give me away? Why was I never told? The questions tumbled out, urgent and raw. Mrs. Gable leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if the very walls of her cottage were listening. Anya was from a powerful, aristocratic family, the Montgomerys, from the city, not humble Oakhaven. They had strict expectations, ancient traditions. She fell in love with a man, a musician, a free spirit, Julian. He was not of their world. Their love was a fierce, passionate flame, but it was forbidden. When she became pregnant with you, it was a scandal that threatened to tear her family apart. Ethan's world tilted. A musician? His father? It was so far removed from the mundane reality of his life at Oakhaven. Anya's family forced her to marry a man of their choosing, a cold, calculating man who would never accept a child not of his blood. To protect you, to shield you from their cruelty and the shame they would have inflicted, she made an agonizing decision. She entrusted you to Margaret and Arthur, distant cousins of hers, with a solemn promise that she would return for you when she was able. She paid them handsomely, Ethan. Monthly sums, substantial amounts, specifically for your care and education, to ensure you had a good life. The words hung in the air, sharp and painful, like broken glass. They took money? Ethan's voice was barely a rasp, his mind reeling. The years of deprivation, the threadbare clothes, the endless toil, all of it a monstrous lie. The bitter taste of injustice filled his mouth. They took money from me, and they treated me like dirt. Mrs. Gable nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. They did, Ethan. I saw it. I knew. I wanted to speak, but they threatened me, threatened to cut me off, to ruin my reputation in the village. They twisted Anya's intentions, claiming she wished to distance herself, that the money was merely a formality. They used it to raise their own children, to improve their own lives, while you suffered. Her voice cracked with sorrow and regret. I am so sorry, child. I should have done more.
Ethan stood frozen, the locket now burning a hole in his hand. The truth, when it finally arrived, was not a gentle balm, but a searing fire. He wasn't simply unloved. He was a pawn, a profitable secret, cruelly exploited. The revelation was a cataclysm, shattering the fragile narrative of his life and replacing it with a horrifying, yet strangely liberating sense of betrayal. The ache in his heart transformed into a cold, hard resolve. His past was a stolen legacy, and he would reclaim it, piece, then agonizing piece. But first, he needed to understand the full extent of this cruel deception. He needed to find Anya. The walk back to Oakhaven Manor from Mrs. Gable's cottage felt like navigating a battlefield, every step an act of defiance against the crushing weight of the truth. The gentle drizzle that had accompanied his departure had intensified, now a relentless downpour, mirroring the storm raging within Ethan. The locket, clutched in his hand, no longer felt like a mere object. It was a burning coal, searing the raw wound of betrayal. Mrs. Gable's words echoed in his mind, a dreadful litany. Paid them handsomely for your care and education, used it to raise their own children. You suffered. He pushed open the heavy oak door of Oakhaven Manor, the familiar scent of stale wood and simmering resentment clinging to the air. Margaret was in the drawing room, her needlepoint basket beside her, while Arthur read a newspaper, his face partially obscured. Liam and Sophia were nowhere to be seen, likely in their rooms, safe in their gilded cages of ignorance. The thought twisted Ethan's gut. How could they live so comfortably, so oblivious, on the back of his stolen childhood? His usual quiet demeanor had evaporated, replaced by a tremor of barely contained rage. He stood in the doorway, the water dripping from his sodden coat, a silent accusation. Arthur slowly lowered his newspaper, his eyes narrowing. Margaret's needle stopped mid-stitch, her gaze lifting, her usual sharp scrutiny now laced with a flicker of unease. They sensed it, the shift in his aura, the tempest gathering behind his stormy eyes. "Ethan, what's got into you? You're soaking wet. Go and change at once," Margaret commanded, her voice brittle. He took a step forward, the floorboards groaning under his trembling weight. "I know," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl, barely recognizable to his own ears. "I know everything." Arthur's eyes hardened. "Know what, boy? Speak plainly." His tone was dismissive, an attempt to reassert control. "I know I'm not your son," Ethan spat, the words tearing from him like jagged shards of glass. He pulled out the locket and the faded photograph, holding them up, their presence a stark, undeniable testament. "I know about Anya. I know about the money. I know you lied. You lied to me, my whole life." A stunned silence descended, thick and suffocating. Margaret's face drained of color, her needlepoint falling from her grasp. Arthur's jaw clenched, his knuckles white against the newspaper. The veneer of their carefully constructed domesticity cracked, revealing the ugly truth beneath. "Don't be ridiculous," Margaret stammered, her voice thin and reedy, a stark contrast to her usual sharp tone. "You're confused. That old woman, Mrs. Gable, she's senile." "Senile?" Ethan scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping him. "Or perhaps she's simply telling the truth you've so desperately tried to bury. She told me about Anya Montgomery, about how my mother paid you for my care. Not for Liam's new coat, not for Sophia's dance lessons, for me." He gestured around the drawing room, his hand sweeping across the plush velvet curtains, the polished antique furniture, the signs of a comfort he had never known. Was this bought with my inheritance? Was my childhood traded for your convenience?
Arthur slammed his fist on the table, the sharp crack echoing through the room. "Enough, you ungrateful wretch. After all we've done for you, this is how you repay us? Spreading malicious gossip?" His face was a mask of fury, but Ethan saw the subtle tremor in his hands, the nervous flicker in his eyes, It was the fear of exposure, not righteous indignation. Done for me? Ethan's voice rose, edged with a raw anguish that pierced the air. You've done nothing but exploit me. You raised me like a servant, not a son. You fed me scraps while your own children feasted. You stole my mother's love, her promise, and her money, and you replaced it with coldness and neglect. Margaret, her face pale as parchment, finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. We were struggling, Ethan. Your mother's family, they never fully accepted her. They offered us a sum to take you in. It was a one-time payment, they said, a small token. We thought we were doing the right thing. Her hands wrung together, a pathetic display of feigned distress. A small token? Ethan's eyes burned into hers. Mrs. Gable said she sent money regularly, substantial sums, for my education, for my future. He saw the subtle shift in Margaret's eyes, the moment her fabricated story crumbled under the weight of his direct accusation. Arthur, seeing his wife falter, stepped forward, his imposing figure looming over Ethan. Listen, boy, your mother, she was a friend. She had problems. She couldn't keep you. We did her a favor. The money was inconsistent. We used it to keep this house, to put food on the table for everyone, you included. You included? Ethan challenged, his voice laced with venom. I ate what was left over. I wore clothes Liam had outgrown. While Liam had tutors, I was working in the fields. While Sophia learned piano, I was mending fences. That's not including me, Arthur. That's using me. The tension in the room coiled tighter, a spring about to snap. Suddenly, a small, childish voice cut through the charged air. What's going on? Liam stood at the threshold, Sophia peeking shyly from behind him, their faces etched with confusion and a touch of fear. The innocence in their eyes, so starkly contrasted with the ugly truth unfolding, struck Ethan with a fresh wave of pain. They were unwitting beneficiaries of his suffering. Margaret immediately rushed to them, pulling them close, her facade of victimhood returning. It's nothing, darlings. Ethan is just upset. Upset? Ethan echoed, a bitter laugh escaping him. I'm not upset, Margaret. I'm furious, and I have every right to be. He turned his gaze back to Arthur, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. Tell me everything, now, the truth. Every single detail. Arthur's shoulders slumped slightly, the fight draining from him. He knew he was caught. The fragile edifice of his carefully constructed lies had finally collapsed. He sat down heavily in his armchair, running a hand through his thinning hair. Your mother, Anya, she was a wild one. She got herself into trouble with a penniless artist. Her family, the Montgomerys, they're old money, powerful. They couldn't have a scandal. They pressured her into a marriage to a man of their choosing, a union that would secure their status. But she was already pregnant with you. They tried to force her to get rid of her, Margaret interjected, her voice still trembling. But Anya refused. She was strong-willed. She came to us, distant relatives, struggling. She offered us a large sum to take you, to raise you, out of sight. It was supposed to be temporary, until she could secure her independence from her family.
She made it clear you were to be well cared for, Arthur continued, avoiding Ethan's gaze. She sent letters, yes, and money, quarterly payments, but he paused, exhaling slowly. Times were hard. Our own children, Liam and Sophia, they deserved the best. The money from Anya, it was too tempting. We used it for them, to give them the opportunities we couldn't otherwise afford. And you were healthy, you were strong. We thought you'd be fine. A new twist, a fresh stab. They hadn't just used the money, they had justified it with the needs of their own children. The sheer, unadulterated selfishness of it burned in Ethan's chest.
The difficult circumstances Margaret had always vaguely referred to were self-inflicted, a moral bankruptcy hidden beneath a veneer of respectability. And the neglect? Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper, though it held the weight of years of silent suffering. The coldness? The way you treated me like a burden? A problem to be solved? Was that part of the plan, too, to make me leave? Margaret flinched, her eyes darting away. We needed you to be independent, Ethan, to stand on your own 2 feet. We knew you were bright, resourceful. We just encouraged you to find your own path. It was a flimsy excuse, transparent and insulting. But then, Arthur added a detail that twisted the knife deeper. And her family. They didn't want any loose ends. They checked on us, subtly, made sure you weren't flaunting any Montgomery connections. We had to make it look like you were just one of our own, struggling like us. And honestly, we didn't want you to feel too entitled. You weren't one of ours, truly. The finality of those words, the absolute rejection, hit Ethan with the force of a physical blow. He was not just unloved, not just exploited. He was a ghost, a secret to be kept, an inconvenient truth to be managed. He was an outsider, always had been, always would be in this house. The anger that had sustained him for moments began to ebb, replaced by a profound, desolate emptiness. He turned, the locket still clenched in his hand, his gaze sweeping over the polished floors, the expensive curtains, the comfortable chairs. This house, this life, was built on a foundation of his mother's pain and his own suffering. He couldn't stay here, not for another moment. As he reached the doorway, a glint of metal caught his eye. In the shadows of the antique side table, half hidden beneath a stack of old magazines, lay a small leather-bound book. It wasn't the locket, but something equally intriguing, an old, worn diary. His heart gave a lurch. He knew, instinctively, that this was something else. He snatched it, almost without thinking, his gaze briefly meeting Arthur's, who was too stunned to react. He didn't wait for permission, didn't utter another word. He simply turned and walked out of the drawing room, out of the life he had known, the sound of the rain still drumming outside, a mournful symphony to his newfound, shattering freedom. He gripped the journal, its age-worn cover a silent promise of deeper, more intricate secrets, perhaps even a truer voice from his past. The truth had set him free, but freedom had never felt so painfully desolate. Ethan walked out of Oakhaven Manor, not just from a house, but from a life built on a treacherous foundation of deceit. The rain-lashed path, once a symbol of his confinement, now felt like a liberation. The small leather-bound journal he had instinctively snatched from the side table felt warm against his clammy palm, a tangible anchor in the swirling chaos of his emotions. He didn't look back, not at the imposing, deceptive facade of the manor, nor at the faces of Margaret and Arthur, frozen in their stunned silence. Their betrayal had cauterized the last lingering tendrils of his attachment. He walked aimlessly at first, the raw pain of exposure mixing with a strange, exhilarating sense of freedom. The village, usually a source of mundane familiarity, now seemed to ripple with unseen judgment, its quaint cottages whispering tales of hidden secrets. He found himself at the small, seldom-used train station, its dilapidated sign promising connections to larger towns. With the few worn banknotes he had painstakingly saved from his meager earnings, he purchased a ticket to London, the sprawling metropolis, a beacon of anonymity and new beginnings. The journey was a blur of gray landscapes and introspective silence. In the crowded, impersonal carriage, Ethan finally allowed himself to open the journal. Its pages, brittle with age, were filled with a flowing, elegant script that immediately struck him as familiar, yet distinct from the hurried scrawl of Margaret or Arthur. His breath hitched as he recognized the initial entries, dates from years ago, coinciding with the vague memories of his early childhood. The first few pages spoke of love, a passionate, defiant love for a man named Julian. Anya's words, vibrant and raw, painted a vivid picture of a hidden romance, stolen moments, and the joyous, terrifying discovery of her pregnancy. Julian's eyes, the color of a summer sky, hold my entire world. And now, a new world grows within me, a tiny heartbeat, a testament to a love they can never truly extinguish. Ethan felt a profound, bittersweet pang. This was his mother, truly his mother, her voice speaking to him across the chasm of time and deceit. Then came the entries marked by despair and increasing urgency. My family, they are relentless. The pressure is suffocating. They demand I marry Lord Ashworth, a man whose gaze is colder than a winter's night. My Julian, he is heartbroken, but helpless against their power. My child, our child, how can I protect you from this cold, cruel world they wish to thrust upon us? The journal then contained a detailed account of her desperate plan, contacting distant cousins, Margaret and Arthur. And then, the vital piece of information Ethan had been so desperate for, a confirmation that resonated with Mrs. Gable's words. I have sent them a substantial sum today and have arranged for quarterly payments to be made directly to their bank. It is for my child, for his well-being, for his future. They have promised to care for him, to cherish him until I can return. Oh, my little one, forgive your mother for this parting. I will come back for you. I swear it, by the stars above and the love in my heart. My contact in Paris, Monsieur Dubois, will be my lifeline. Anya's last entry before a long gap detailed the address of the Montgomery family estate in London, a stark contrast to the humble address Mrs. Gable had given him for Anya's current whereabouts. The journal was not a letter of abandonment, but a desperate cry of a mother forced to choose between two unthinkable impossibilities. The rage against Margaret and Arthur intensified, but it was now tempered by a profound understanding of his mother's sacrifice. London was a sensory explosion after the quiet confines of Oakhaven. The roar of carriages, the cacophony of voices, the towering buildings that scraped the sky, it was overwhelming, yet exhilarating. Ethan, a lone figure amidst the bustling crowds, felt both lost and strangely invigorated. He spent his first night in a cheap, dingy boarding house, the journal clutched to his chest like a lifeline. He knew his next step: find Anya. His journey led him from the cobbled streets of London to the artistic heart of Paris. The address Mrs. Gable had given him was a small, elegant gallery nestled in a charming, sun-drenched street. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and fervent hope. What if? What if she had forgotten him? What if she had built a new life, leaving no room for the ghost of her past?
He pushed open the heavy glass door of the gallery. The air inside was cool, infused with the subtle scent of clay and oil paint. Sculptures of startling beauty adorned pedestals, their forms evoking raw emotion and powerful narratives. A woman with striking silver hair, elegantly pulled back, stood in the center of the room, her back to him, meticulously adjusting the lighting on a large, swirling bronze piece that seemed to capture the essence of a turbulent storm. His breath caught in his throat, her silhouette, her bearing, the almost imperceptible tremor of her hands as she worked. It was her. It had to be. The woman in the photograph, matured, refined, yet undeniably the same. "Excuse me?" Ethan managed, his voice a dry, rasping whisper. The woman turned slowly, her head tilting slightly. Her eyes, the same piercing gray as his own, widened fractionally. For a long moment, she simply stared, her expression unreadable, a complex tapestry of shock, recognition, and something akin to a phantom pain. Time seemed to stop, suspended in the space between them. "Ethan," she whispered,
her voice husky, as if the name itself was a delicate, precious thing, rarely spoken aloud. Tears, hot and undeniable, welled in Ethan's eyes. He had dreamed of this moment, yearned for it, but the reality was far more overwhelming. "Mother," he choked out, the word feeling foreign on his tongue, yet profoundly right. Anya Montgomery, the renowned sculptor, dropped the cloth she was holding. A gasp escaped her, and then, like a dam breaking, the composure she had held for decades shattered. She stumbled forward, her arms outstretched, and then she was there, engulfing her in an embrace that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. It was a deluge of emotion, regret, longing, a desperate, fierce love that had been caged for too long. She pulled back, her hands cupping his face, her eyes searching every inch of him to reassure herself he was real. Tears streamed down her face, glistening like diamonds. "My son, my little one, I knew you would come. I always knew." They spent hours talking in a quiet corner of her studio, the sculptures around them bearing silent witness to a reunion decades in the making. Anya recounted her story, her voice raw with emotion. She spoke of the suffocating pressure from her family, the forced marriage to a cold, powerful man named Lord Ashworth, who would later become a prominent figure in Parliament. She recounted her desperate attempts to find out about Ethan, her letters to Margaret and Arthur going unanswered, her regular payments inexplicably stopping after a few years without any explanation. Her family, through veiled threats and subtle manipulations, had ensured she had minimal contact with the outside world, especially anything that could jeopardize her respectable new life. "I tried, Ethan," she sobbed, her voice cracking. "I sent detectives, private investigators, but Margaret and Arthur moved, vanished for a time. Their replies to my last letters were curt, dismissive. They claimed you were happy, well-adjusted, and wished no contact with your past. I was trapped, married into a world where every move was watched, every word weighed. I feared that if I pushed too hard, they might harm you, or reveal your existence to my husband, who would have been merciless." The raw pain in her voice was palpable, stripping away any lingering resentment Ethan might have held. She had suffered too, a different kind of imprisonment. Then came the revelation about his father, Julian. Anya's eyes softened, a bittersweet glow entering them. "He was a musician, Ethan, Julian Alastair. He had a soul made of pure melody. We met in a small bohemian cafe in London before my family's clutches tightened. Our love was fleeting, passionate, and real. He was so excited about you, my love. He used to write songs for you, sketch little pictures of what he imagined you'd look like."
But then, her voice faltered, a fresh wave of sorrow washing over her. He was ill, Ethan. A fever, a sudden, merciless illness. He died before you were born. I never told anyone the truth. Not my family, not even Margaret and Arthur. I let them believe your father was someone else, a convenient fiction. It was to protect you, my darling, to keep his memory untainted by the scandal that followed me, to shield you from the pain of losing him before you even knew him. The words hit Ethan like a thunderclap. His father was a musician, a poet, and he had died before Ethan drew his first breath. The loss was profound, yet strangely, a new connection formed. He had a name now, a face in his mind, a legacy of artistry and passion. Anya's secret, held for so long, was a testament not to abandonment, but to a mother's desperate, all-encompassing love and protection. He opened the journal. "Mother," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I think Julian might have left something for me." He showed her the journal, and her hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming anew. "His journal! Oh, my love, you have his journal!"
She embraced him again, a fierce, joyous hug that sealed the raw edges of their fragmented pasts. The Locket's secret had finally yielded its greatest, most poignant truth. The Parisian studio, bathed in the soft glow of twilight filtering through its large arched windows, became Ethan's sanctuary. Here, amidst the scent of clay and oil, he began to understand not just his mother's past, but his own future. Anya, her eyes still holding the echoes of past sorrows, was a phoenix risen from the ashes of her aristocratic gilded cage. Her success as a sculptor was not just a testament to her talent, but to her indomitable spirit, a spirit Ethan now recognized within himself. He learned of Julian, his father, not just from Anya's tearful recollections, but from the pages of the journal, a symphony of unfulfilled dreams and boundless love. The journal became Ethan's compass. Julian's entries were filled with vivid descriptions of music, art, and a profound, almost spiritual connection to the natural world. He painted not just landscapes, but emotions, and his words, though sometimes melancholic, pulsed with an unyielding hope for the child he would never meet. One particular entry resonated deeply with Ethan, a detailed sketch of a tiny, imagined hand grasping a paintbrush. Beneath it, Julian scrawled words, "May your hands find their purpose, little one, and may your heart always guide them towards beauty and truth." It was a revelation, a genetic whisper that explained Ethan's own quiet inclination towards sketching, a solitary pleasure he had always hidden. As days turned into weeks, Ethan and Anya wove together the fragmented pieces of their shared history. Anya, no longer bound by fear or societal chains, pursued legal action against Margaret and Arthur. The process was slow, arduous, and emotionally draining, but necessary. Evidence from Mrs. Gable, combined with Anya's meticulously kept financial records of payments to Oakhaven Manor, built an irrefutable case. The Montgomery family, despite their initial resistance to Anya's public actions, could not deny the meticulous documentation of their past financial support for Ethan's care, thus inadvertently reinforcing Anya's claims against Margaret and Arthur. The news of the scandal rippled through Oakhaven. The quaint village, usually so insulated, buzzed with hushed whispers and indignant murmurs. Margaret and Arthur, once respected members of their community, became pariahs. They were summoned to court, their faces etched with a mixture of disbelief and bitter resentment. Liam and Sophia, suddenly exposed to the ugliness of their parents' deceit, were visibly shattered.
Ethan saw their confusion, their dawning shame, and a flicker of pity stirred within him, but it was quickly overshadowed by the years of his own quiet suffering. He offered them no solace, for he had none to give. The court proceedings were a stark, public dissection of Ethan's stolen childhood. Arthur, in a desperate attempt to salvage their reputation, tried to paint Ethan as ungrateful, a troubled boy who had always been a burden. "He was a difficult child," Arthur declared, his voice booming in the courtroom. "Always aloof, never fitting in. We did our best with him, gave him a home, food on his table." But Anya, her voice clear and resonant, countered his every lie. She presented the detailed payment records, the letters, and Mrs. Gable's brave testimony. They were paid to provide love and care, not just a roof over his head. They chose to deny him both, while lining their own pockets with funds intended for his well-being. Ethan, seated beside Anya, felt a peculiar detachment. He was no longer the frightened, unloved boy. He was a man, standing on the precipice of a new beginning, armed with the truth. When he was called to testify, his voice, though still quiet, carried the weight of his experience. He spoke not with anger, but with a measured recounting of his life of toil, the constant criticism, the stark disparity between his treatment and that of Liam and Sophia.
He spoke of the hunger, the cold, the yearning for a kind word that never came. His testimony, delivered without theatrics but with unflinching honesty, resonated with the judge and jury. The verdict was swift and decisive. Margaret and Arthur were found guilty of fraud and gross negligence. They faced fines and a suspended sentence, their reputation irrevocably tarnished. Their carefully constructed world crumbled around them, a stark contrast to the comfortable existence they had built on Ethan's pain. Ethan felt no triumph, only a weary sense of closure. Justice, though cold, had been served. With the legal battle behind them, Ethan finally allowed himself to breathe. Anya, with tears of relief, embraced him. "The past is behind us, my love," she whispered, her voice a balm to his bruised soul. "Now we build our future." Paris, with its vibrant art scene and endless possibilities, became Ethan's true home. He enrolled in an art academy, encouraged by Anya, who saw in him the raw talent and quiet passion that had defined Julian. The act of creation, of shaping clay with his own hands, felt like a reclaiming of his stolen legacy, a tangible connection to the father he never knew. He found solace in the quiet solitude of his work, transforming his past pain into powerful, expressive forms. His art, much like his mother's, became a testament to resilience, to the enduring power of the human spirit. One particularly poignant sculpture he created was titled The Unfolding Heart. It depicted a hardened, closed form slowly unfurling, revealing delicate, vulnerable layers within, with a small silver locket embedded at its core. It was a metaphor for his own journey, the gradual breaking down of the walls he had built around himself, allowing the warmth of love and acceptance to finally penetrate. His relationship with Anya deepened, evolving from mother and son reunited to two artists, two survivors, bound by shared understanding and mutual respect. She taught him the nuances of sculpting, the patience required, the ability to see beauty in imperfection. He, in turn, brought a youthful perspective, a fresh set of eyes that reminded her of the raw, unadulterated passion of her own early days. One quiet afternoon, as Ethan was sketching, he stumbled upon a loose leaf hidden deep within Julian's journal. It wasn't a formal letter, but a hastily scribbled poem, a final, poignant farewell from his father. It spoke of light, of a child yet to be born, and a wish for boundless freedom. "May you soar, my nascent son, beyond the shadows of my fleeting song. Find your own sky, your own melody, and let no earthly chains bind your spirit." Ethan traced the words with a trembling finger. Julian had known, had truly known, the constraints that might be placed upon his son. His love, his hopes, had transcended death, a silent, guiding star. Years later, Ethan Mallory, no longer defined by his past, stood confidently beside Anya at one of her prestigious gallery openings. His own smaller sculptures, distinct in style but echoing her emotional depth, were displayed in a separate section, garnering quiet admiration. He saw his own journey reflected in the eyes of the attendees, some recognizing the subtle pain, others the quiet triumph. He carried the locket now, not as a symbol of betrayal, but as a reminder of his origins, a tangible link to Anya's sacrifice and Julian's enduring spirit. He looked around the vibrant room, the clinking of glasses, the hum of conversations, the soft light illuminating the art. He had found his place, not through obligation or inherited wealth, but through the courage to seek the truth, the resilience to overcome injustice, and the profound, transformative power of rediscovered love. The boy who was denied affection and burdened with a family's debt had become a man, unburdened and free, His story, an unwritten chapter waiting to be sculpted by his own hands. His heart, once a lonely fortress, was now an open, vibrant canvas, ready to embrace the boundless possibilities of a life truly his own. And so concludes The Locket's Secret, a story that delves into the profound depths of deceit, the strength of the human spirit, and the extraordinary power of truth. We hope Ethan's journey resonated deeply with you. This tale reminds us that true family is not always defined by blood, but by love, honesty, and unwavering support. It teaches us the importance of seeking truth, no matter how painful, and the liberating power of forgiveness, not for the sake of the betrayer, but for the healing of one's own soul. May this story inspire you to embrace your own narrative, to overcome your burdens, and to remember that even in the deepest shadows, the light of hope and discovery can always prevail. If Ethan's journey touched your heart, please leave a comment below with your thoughts. Hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories.